Hey guys, this week we're going to be going over a 3 and 4 field technique for the pelvis, more specifically for a rectum case. We still use a 3 and 4 field technique for rectums quite regularly for definitive cases, curative cases even. You'll also use 3 and 4 field techniques for palliative cases, or it doesn't have to be pelvis. You can do it other places too. So it's good techniques to understand and use. They're pretty simple. I think you'll find it pretty easy. So first we'll start with a 4 field technique. Just gonna insert my new plan. Let me just label it so we can keep everything straight. So in this structure set, we have an initial volume going to 45 gray, and then we have a boost volume going to 50-40. I'm going to focus on the initial volume in this video, but I'm going to have you guys do both the initial and the boost plan. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is add MLC. Then I'll copy this beam and paste it so that I have my 4 beams. I'm going to change my gantry angles so that I have four equal beams. Okay, once you do that, we can set our MLC shape. So usually it's okay and pretty common to just use a ½ cm margin on our PTV, but of course that's up to your physician and what they want to do. In my clinic and most clinics I plan for, a ½ cm margin is generally what you'll want. So we'll add a ½ cm margin to all of these beams. Okay, our prescription is 180 times 25 for the initial. And let's calculate. Okay, so a couple things right off the bat. You notice it's really hot. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to click F3 or open up my field weighting, however you guys like to do that. And I'm going to change my total field weight to 1. It's a good habit to get into. Before, our total field weight was based on a factor of 4, right? That's why it's 436% hot. Okay, it's putting 100% of our dose from each beam. So we want the total weight to be 1. Now it looks a little bit more normal. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to normalize so that I have 100 covering 95% of my target volume. Again, that will be kind of based on how your physician likes to do things. But I think in most clinics, everyone's shooting for at least 95% coverage, so that's what we'll do generally in this course. So for this particular case, I'm going to leave this normalized 100 covering 95. There's going to be some times where we'll change that, but for now we'll just leave it as is. Okay, so a couple things. I calculated this at 6x. All 4 beams are at 6x, just so we can see what it looks like here. Okay, so I have, let's see, I mean, you can tell, so we have 90% over here in the periphery. We could adjust that weighting a little bit to even that out, but I just want you to take a mental picture, okay, of what this looks like, and we're going to change some of these. So we'll leave field 1 as 6x since our PTV does get pretty close to the surface down here. So we want that superficial coverage. All these other beams are going through quite a bit of tissue, right? So there's no reason to have those at 6x. Let's change those to 15x. I would change them to the highest energy that you use clinically. So it looks like there's an 18x and a 20x here. In my clinic, we only have, the highest we have is 15x. So I'm just picking 15x, pretending like that's the highest we have here. I don't know if these are commissioned or not, but anyways, let's just pretend 15x is the highest we can go. And now let's recalculate. And I want you to just watch, how these isodose lines change. So you can see our 70 line is now bowing in quite a bit more. We got rid of that 90. So just showing you guys that energy selection is important, and it doesn't matter. So now we can start playing with our field weight. So this is a 4-field plan, right? So most of the time, if you're going to do a 4-field plan, you're going to just even out your dose distribution. So maybe we can add a little bit to field 4 here. Too much. So what I did there was I locked my AP and PA beams, and so now when I change these, I'm only taking away or adding weight from my lateral beams. Okay, so you're gonna use these locks over here quite a bit. We'll also use this filter quite a bit, maybe not in this plan, but throughout this course. So that looks pretty even, I think, left to right. What we could also do is do the opposite. So now I have my AP and PA unlocked, so I can maybe add weight to this AP beam down here. Okay, so that's evening that out, and the more we even out our dose, the cooler it should get. So this is that's all a 4-field is. It's pretty simple. It does look like our plan is still pretty hot. Let's turn all these contours off. I'm going to come here to isodose levels and turn my 107 line on in 3D. And what I like to do is, instead of translucent, I like to use segment. Okay, so I'll do segment magenta. So we do have this big chunk of 107. And you can kind of review that in all of your beams. And if it was really off to one side, that tells me I could adjust my field weight, and try to even that out. But if you run through all of our beams I've used here, it's kind of in the middle. There's nothing obvious that we can do. It looks like we could maybe put a little bit more, to the front of the patient. But for this case, what do we have down here on the AP side? We have the bladder, right? So what we want to do for this case is avoid the bladder. So you can still use a 4-field plan to do that, but what I would actually want to do for this case is put very little weight through that bladder. Okay, so you can see we got rid of a lot of that dose in that bladder, but now we have all this dose on our laterals, and our plan is really hot, 128%. So what are we going to do about that? So what I'm looking for here is I'm kind of trying to balance hot spots laterally with my bladder dose. So what I want is that 50% line. I really want that to stay pretty tight against my lateral blocks here. Okay, so if I go too high on field 3, that AP beam, you can see that 50% line bows out, right? I want it to stay really tight up against those lateral blocks. So 18, I think, looked pretty good. So all this will look differently depending on the shape of your patient, how big or how small they are. So our 50 line is just starting to kind of pull away from those blocks, right? So I want to stop adding weight to that beam. We do have just a tiny speck of our 100% popping up over here, but what we're going to do is cool this plan down quite a bit, so I know that dose will be reduced as we start planning. So we're going to try this out. The other thing that I want to look at is when I'm doing 3D plans, pretty much every 3D plan, my goal is to get rid of all of the 107. Okay, that's not always possible, and you definitely can't always do that. But if I can, I'm going to. So I always turn my 107 line on in 3D like this, and I evaluate whether or not I can block all that out. So I definitely can block this volume out. We have this large open area right here, which is good. So if this 107 volume was, well, it probably is in, oh, we still even in this view have a little bit of an open area. But anyways, if my goal is to get rid of the 107, that means that 107 volume cannot cover my whole field. Okay, if it covers my whole field, then I would have to block the whole field essentially, which just doesn't make sense, right? You can't block your whole field. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of that field. So we need a little bit of open area. If my goal is to get rid of 110, I would turn my 110 line on, and same thing. I need to make sure before I even start planning or adding field and fields, I need to make sure my initial field weighting is correct, my initial block margins are correct. You know, you need to make all those changes up front before you start planning. So I don't have any big hot spots out here on the laterals. That 50 line is pretty tight in my bladder, so I know I'm avoiding my bladder very well. And my goal is to get rid of the 107. I think I can do that based on this look right here. We have a ton of open area, so I won't be blocking my whole field. I think I can get rid of this. So this is, you know, the basics of your 4-field technique. Again, it doesn't have to be used in the pelvis. You can use it anywhere. You know, it just depends where your OARs are. So we're treating the rectum. There's nothing behind the rectum that we need to spare, right? So you can put a majority of your dose into the patient with this field 1, right? But you have to think about what's on the other side too. So if I put more dose coming from field 1, I'll have more dose exiting through the bladder, right? So you also have to look at exit dose. Field 3, we have pretty low dose, you know, coming through there because again, there's the bladder there. Laterally, the only thing we really have to think about are the femoral heads and femurs, but you can see our blocks are already kind of missing most of those, so don't have to worry too much about those. And if you think about it from an objective standpoint, you know, what dose objectives are you trying to meet? Your bladder is going to be more sensitive, more important than your femoral heads. So if I had to choose between putting dose through my bladder or my femoral heads, I would choose to put some more through my femoral heads. And then this is just muscle and fat tissue. So even if we had some hot spots out here in this fat tissue, that's okay. You know, we don't have any real constraints over there to worry about. So I like this field arrangement. This is typically how I do these rectum cases. Okay, so this is how I want you guys to do it. Well, this is one, I'll give you the option. You can do a 3-field or a 4-field. So we have this 4-field option right here. I'll show you the 3-field, but really it's not too different because all we're going to do is delete one of our fields, and we're going to delete this AP field, right? So we delete that field, and we just need to redistribute our weighting a little bit. So you can tell we have way too much dose coming from our lateral beams, right? So we need to put more dose through that PA beam. again, it's just kind of a balancing act. It looks laterally like our dose is pretty even. The main difference between this one and the 4-field one is you can see we have no help coming from the front of the patient, right? We have no dose coming over here, so all of it's coming from the back and the laterals. So our plan is a lot hotter, okay? So it's going to take more field and fields to cool this plan down. We compare these two, you can see the bladder is about the same. So that's usually why I do that 4-field plan. Again, the only difference is a lightly weighted AP beam, okay? Because really the bladder is very, very similar. If you look way down here at the low dose, that 4-field plan is giving a little bit more to that bladder, which makes sense. We have that low dose contribution coming from that lightly weighted AP beam, but you know the high dose is the same. And as far as the constraints we're going to be trying to meet, it doesn't matter. So I prefer the 4-field technique. Let's look at our femurs again. Pretty similar, so it's really up to you. Different clinics will have different rules, and different doctors will swear by one technique over the other, but really I think from a dosimetry standpoint it doesn't matter too much. So I'll give you the option. You can use a 4-field technique, you know, with that lightly weighted AP beam, or you can do a 3-field technique. So what I will show you on this 3-field plan, since I'm not going to use it for the rest of this video, I want to show you just real quick. Some people will do these with field and fields, which is how I prefer to do it. Some people will use wedges or EDWs. So on Varian machines, at least, the only bummer with, well, there's kind of two bummers with EDWs. One is you can only use them with your Y jaws. So what an EDW is it's an electronic version of a jaw. It tries to emulate the effect of a physical, not a jaw, of a wedge. So it tries to emulate the effect of a physical wedge by just slowly sliding one of your Y jaws down across the field. So depending on what wedge you pick, you know, it'll move slower or faster. And you can only do that with your Y jaws. So in this case, what we'd have to do is rotate both our field 2 and field 4 collimator to 90, refit our MLCs, and this is problem number 1. Okay, so because we have to rotate that and refit that, you can see we don't get a very conformal block edge, okay, because our MLCs are over here. We want those MLCs to come in and block that bladder. That's right where our bladder is. It's pretty important for those MLCs to be able to go in there. So that's problem number 1. But let's just continue so you can see. If I come here to properties and accessories, we probably need a pretty big wedge. So I always forget what in and out, you know, what direction that is. So we have all of our beam weight, or all of our dose coming from the posterior side of this patient, right? So we want our wedge to be pushing dose more to the AP direction. So this would be the opposite direction we want. So I'll do out. That looks better. So it's gonna, you know, effectively push our dose towards the front of this patient. So this side should be the opposite. In, yep. So we have two 60-degree EDWs. So what that means is it's going to try to emulate the effect of a 60-degree physical wedge, but it's all done with the jaws. So let's calculate. So 60 was maybe a little too much. You can see it really pushed that dose down here, but it cooled our plan off significantly. And the reason is because it's, we're getting a lot better coverage now towards the AP side of this PTV. So it dropped our monitor units down quite a bit. That's why it cooled off. So we can try a 45-degree EDW if we want, or I could probably just add a little bit more weight to this field 1. Something like that. So our hotspot is only 108.7. Really, we could be about done with this plan. So that's why a lot of people like to plan with wedges or EDWs, because usually it's a lot faster. We did that in just a few minutes. The problem with this plan is the conformality of our block. So if we look at our DVH, you can see now that 3-field plan with those EDWs is giving a lot more dose to the bladder. Okay, so that's problem number 1 with the EDW, is you lose freedom of how you want your collimator angled. Problem number 2 is if we did have some hot spots left over in this plan, you cannot create field-in fields on a plan with an EDW. You just can't do it. So there's some workarounds to that. I won't go over it right now, but in general, if you know you're going to want to add field-in fields from the same beam that you want to add an EDW to, you just can't do that. But essentially what we're going to do in this 4-field plan is copy, if you think about it, exactly what that EDW is doing. So what that EDW is doing is moving this jaw on this side. So remember, we had to rotate our collimator, so it's a Y jaw, but it was moving this jaw slowly over the path of the beam so that it blocked more of this area right here, and it left this side open for a longer period of time. So it's delivering more MU on this side than on this side, essentially. And we're going to do the exact same thing with field-in fields. We're going to add field-in fields, block out this hot spot for a significant portion of the beam on time, okay, which is going to cool it down back here. We're going to let it treat this cooler area for the entire beam on time. Makes sense? That's all you're doing with the field-in fields. Is for field 2, it's delivering 79 MU. We want it to deliver 79 MU to this entire blue area, this entire part of the PTV that is receiving less than 107% of the dose. But we want less monitor units delivered to this hot area because it's too hot. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So we're doing the same thing as the EDW is doing, pretty much. It just is going to take us a little bit longer to do. So let's get started. It does not make sense for us to add field-in fields to this AP or PA beam, right? Because it's just going the whole length of the field. And if you look at our dose distribution, this 107 is all, in the back, right? And it's cooler up front. So if we block from this PA or AP beam, we'll be blocking that cold area too. So we're trying to block this hot area, which we will be blocking, but we would also be blocking this cold area. So if I add a field-in field here and block this area, it's going to essentially lose coverage and you're going to be fighting yourself. So every time you add a field-in field, it'll be cooling it down, but it'll also be cooling it down up here. You'll lose coverage and you'll just go in a never-ending kind of circle. So what we want to do is use this one. So we're going to block this really hot area in the back, but we're going to leave this cool area alone in the front. So right click, new field and field. I'm going to select the MLCs that I want to move. I'm going to use my shaping tool to draw where I want. Stupid message. I'm going to draw where I want those MLCs to go. Okay, so when I'm first teaching people how to do 3D planning, I always tell them to start with 3% on their field and fields. You add 3%, you can't really go wrong. But since our plan is pretty hot, 124%, and it's a record just from personal experience, I know I can cheat and do 4, maybe even 5%, and still get a really good looking plan. But in general, I think 3% is where people should start until you get more experience and feel comfortable and really understand what's happening, and then you can start cheating, up higher and higher on your field and fields. But what I like to do is, again, I turn on the line I want to get rid of, right? I'm trying to get rid of 107, so that's the one I have on. That's the one I'm going to have on the whole time. And I'm going to go from one side to the other, just back and forth. So we did field 2. Now let's do the other side. If you plan this way, it's honestly really simple, which you'll see. It's usually really quick, and it just makes logical sense to me because your first field and fields are going to be your biggest ones, and they'll just get smaller and smaller. Some planners like to turn on like a really high isodose line first, so maybe they'll turn on like 120% and get rid of that, and then they'll work their way. They'll kind of do the opposite. I personally don't like doing it that way, just because you risk causing cold spots on the front here, which again I'm not going to show you, but hopefully you take my word for it. But as you can see here, I'm just going to go left to right, left to right, left to right, back and forth. If you do one at a time, you'll have, again, just a slightly better looking plan. But you could also try doing 2 at a time, so you can do both sides before you recalculate if you want to. But again, the more field and fields you add, the more weight you add to them without recalculating, the higher the likelihood of a cold spot appearing. Okay, so you can see what's happening, right? If we look at field 2, we have our open field, we have our largest field and field, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. As we start to block, that hot spot out, and we're adding about 4 MUs, every single time. All of our field and fields are about 4 MUs, so we're taking monitor units away from that open field and adding them to these field and fields with a percentage of the field blocked, right? And it's always a good idea to, after you do a few on each side, come look at your isodose distribution, make sure everything is looking okay. In a couple of these spots, you can see these little zigzaggy looking isodose lines, right? So this is our 105 line, and it looks a little that is where, and then you can see these orange lines, right? So these orange lines are the MLC of our field and fields. So we added a field and field here, we added one here. You can see it's making our isodose lines, these low dose isodose lines 105, a little zigzaggy. So that's what'll happen if you add too much weight to your field and fields, that effect will start to happen to like your 95 line or your 100 line, and that's it. The resolution of your plan will just go down. So the lowest percentage you add to your field and field, the smoother your isodose distribution will be. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, especially at 105. You know, it's fine. 105 is, or our coverage, our 100% line still looks perfectly fine. So, I mean, it's okay. I'm just telling you, if you add too much weight, that zigzaggy shape will start to happen to your important lines, like your 100 and 95. So we last did field 2. Let's do field 4. And we are going to do this until that 107 is all gone. Since this is just a demonstration, I'm going to start to cheat. Okay, I'm going to put 6 here. But for you guys, I want 3 or 4. 3 or 4%. Okay, all gone. That's what we want. So this is about what your plan should look like. So we have some 95 out here laterally, but that's okay. I want you guys to shoot for a hot spot laterally of less than 100. That should be your goal. Our 50 line is still very tight along our bladder. So again, that just tells me we're doing a good job of sparing our bladder. Hot spot is less than 107. This is what your bowel or your bladder should look like for that initial plan at least. Last, what I want you to do when you have a solid plan, I want you to merge all those subfields. So if you come up here to planning, merge subfields, you'll combine all those field and fields together. And I want you to call the initial plan that you want me to review initial. Okay, so again, feel free. You can do 4 field, you can do 3 field. You can use EDWs if you want. You can plan it however you want to. But our goal, these are the constraints I want you guys to meet. Okay, So these first three, so this is based on a planned sum between your initial and your boost plan. So I want you to make a planned sum and evaluate these constraints. Okay, so your PTV 50/40 and your planned sum should, so we're shooting for the best coverage listed here. So you're shooting for 100% greater than 85%, 100% greater than 85% on your PTV 45. So these are pretty low just to ensure that we meet these OAR constraints. So I want you to get 95% coverage first, but if you get 95% coverage and you're not meeting one of these OAR constraints, then you can back down all the way to 85% coverage in your planned sum in order to meet these constraints. Okay, you should be able to meet these constraints pretty easily though. So these are the constraints that you're shooting for. I'll put them in the weak folder. So merge your fields, and again, you can leave practice ones in here, I don't care. But the final one that you want me to review, name that initial. How I like to set up my boost plans is I want to use the same ISO as the initial just to make it easy on the therapist. So I'm just going to copy this plan here, call it boost or something like that. I'll just call it plan 2. I'm going to uncalc my plan. So the easiest way to uncalc your plan is just to reset the calculation volume right here. And then I'm just going to delete all these other fields. Okay, and then I can reuse those initial 4 fields, but set my block margin to PTV 50/40. So our boost prescription, since we're trying to get to 50/40 total, is just 180 times 3. I deleted all those field and fields, so what I need to do is reset my total field weight to 1. I need to change my target volume to my boost volume, PTV 50/40. What I also want you guys to do is this point right here, this virtual point, is associated to the PTV 4500. So we need to create a new virtual point. So I'm going to come here and do a new reference point. I call it PTV 50/40. I'm going to associate it to PTV 50/40. Okay, so by doing that, we just created a physical point. And physical points can be useful for certain things, but we want a virtual point. So to create a virtual point, I'm going to right click, delete, and then I'm going to delete the location only. Okay, so our point is there, but now it's a virtual point. It has no location. So I can switch that. I can right click on reference points, reference point organizer, and I can remove PTV 4500 from the plan. Okay, so I want you guys to do that too. Let's recalculate quick. And our field weighting should be already set up because we just copied the plan, right? So the weighting should be pretty good, but you can play around with it and change it if it needs to be changed. It looks like actually we could even this weight out. You can see we have all this 90 on this side, but none on this side. So our field weighting does need to be evened out a little bit. And it looks like since it is only 90/90, we could possibly add a little bit more weight to this field 1 on this boost plan to further reduce the dose to our bladder. Let's just check our plan sum real quick. let's look at our bladder. So you can make a plan sum, you know, but what I want you to do is, so this plan 2, after you add all your field and fields and plan it, you will merge these fields also, and so it'll create a new plan, and you name that new plan boost, and then I want you to create a plan sum with your final initial plan and your final boost plan, okay? And please only leave that one plan sum in your plan, just to make it easier for me to review. Let's look at some of these dose constraints. So bladder, V35 less than 50%. Oh, sorry. Open the plan sum up again. Okay, V35 less than 50%. So 35 is right here. We are way under 50%. It's more like 35%. And then V40 less than 35%. If we come here to 40, we're just barely under 35% there. So again, it looks like we can optimize our weighting a little bit on that boost plan, but it is possible. I know it's possible because I've done it. So what I want you guys to do is plan that boost, you know, all by yourself, and again, try to meet all those constraints with your plan sum, and that's what will be graded on. If you meet all those constraints and you're following, you know, just basic good dosimetry practices, so no crazy hot spots, good field margins, everything, you know, makes sense, then you'll be good to go. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out and let me know.